The city didn't sleep, and neither did Lena. She lay in a bed too soft, staring at a ceiling too high, listening to silence that felt louder than any storm. Her hands still ached from the river. Her heart still carried the weight of a choice she didn't fully understand yet. Downstairs, Julian King sat alone in his study, staring at documents he couldn't focus on. The girl who pulled him from death now stood at the center of a war she never asked for. Hello, friends. Welcome to Black Bite Stories. Before we begin today's story, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love hearing from our global family. Morning came with headlines. Lena woke to her phone buzzing violently. Message after message. Unknown numbers. Her face was everywhere. Billionaire's mystery savior. Village girl enters king's world. Is this love or strategy? Tiana burst into the room, eyes wide with panic. She shoved her phone toward Lena. The photos were grainy but unmistakable. Lena leaving the hospital with Julian. Lena entering his building. Lena standing beside him at a charity event she'd attended out of obligation, not choice. The captions were vicious. Gold digger plays hero. Poor girl traps rich man. The rescue that changed everything. Lena's stomach turned. She hadn't trapped anyone. She'd saved a dying man because it was right. Now the city was rewriting her story, turning courage into calculation. She dressed quickly and went downstairs. Julian stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp and controlled. I don't care what they're saying. You will not run that story. He ended the call and turned to see Lena. His face softened instantly. I'm sorry, he said. This started faster than I expected. Lena crossed her arms. They think I planned this. Julian shook his head. They think that because it's easier than admitting a village girl could just be good. Before Lena could respond, the doorbell rang. A courier stood outside holding a large envelope. Julian took it, his jaw tightening as he read the contents. Inside was a printed article draft, unpublished but ready. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Withdraw quietly. This ends cleanly. Lena stared at the words. They're offering me peace, Julian said bitterly. On their terms. Lena felt something settle inside her. Not fear. Resolve. No, she said. Julian looked at her. No? I didn't survive the river to drown quietly in lies, Lena repeated firmly. Julian studied her face, seeing the same girl who'd refused to let go of that wooden stick. If you fight this, he said carefully, they'll come at you harder. Lena met his gaze. Then let them see who I really am. The press conference was Julian's idea, but Lena made it her own. She stood before cameras and microphones, dressed simply in a modest blue dress. No jewelry except her grandmother's thin bracelet. Julian stood beside her, not in front of her. The room buzzed with anticipation. Reporters leaned forward, pens ready, cameras rolling. Lena took a breath and began. My name is Lena Harper. I'm 19 years old. I grew up in Rosewood Bend, a village by the river. I was raised by my grandmother. I went to public school. I worked in the market. She paused, letting the simplicity of her life settle over the room. The day I met Julian King, I didn't know his name. I didn't know his wealth. I didn't know what his face looked like on a billboard. She lifted her hands slightly, showing the faint scars on her palms. I knew one thing. A man was drowning. The room went still. I didn't plan to save him, Lena continued. I reacted. I grabbed the nearest stick. I held on because that's what you do when someone is dying in front of you. She looked directly into the cameras. If helping someone survive is manipulation, then we need to ask ourselves what kind of world we live in. A reporter raised a hand. Miss Harper, critics say your relationship with Mr. King conveniently began after that rescue. Lena nodded. Yes, because that's when we met. A few nervous laughs scattered through the room. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for protection. I didn't ask to be here, Lena said. I came to the city because my grandmother is sick. Because men with clipboards came to our village and started measuring land like people didn't live there. She reached into her folder and held up a document. My mother once worked in this city. She believed in protecting communities like mine. She was pressured to leave quietly. No scandal. No headlines, just paperwork. Julian's breath caught. He hadn't known this part. I won't let the same thing happen to me, Lena said firmly. I won't disappear to make powerful people comfortable. The room exploded with questions. Julian stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. There are claims that Lena Harper orchestrated her encounter with me. Those claims are false. He gestured toward a screen behind them. Images appeared. Timestamps. River photos, independent witness statements. These are records from Rosewood Bend. Witnesses, time-stamped footage. The rescue occurred before any public knowledge of my disappearance. A man stood from the back of the room. Victor Hale. His presence shifted the energy instantly. With all due respect, Victor said smoothly, emotion doesn't equal innocence. Julian's eyes hardened. No, but evidence does. The screen changed again, displaying survey documents, rushed filings, unauthorized land assessments near the river. Victor Hale has been pursuing aggressive development in Rosewood Bend without full approval, Julian said evenly. The same development my father's company abandoned years ago due to ethical concerns. Victor's smile slipped. The room erupted. Cameras swung toward Victor. Questions flew like arrows. He left swiftly, his composure cracked for the first time anyone could remember. After the conference, Lena collapsed onto a couch in Julian's office, exhaustion flooding every muscle. I think I might throw up, she muttered weakly. Tiana handed her water, eyes shining with pride. Girl, you just walked into a room full of wolves and made them listen. Julian crouched in front of Lena. You were incredible. I was terrified, Lena admitted. That doesn't cancel courage, Julian said softly. A knock came at the door. Julian's assistant stepped in, expression unreadable. The board is split, but Victor lost ground, and the land case is a temporary halt pending investigation. Lena exhaled shakily. That night, Lena sat alone on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights no longer looked like a wall. They looked smaller, less powerful. Julian joined her quietly. You changed things today, he said. Lena shook her head. I just told the truth. Julian studied her. That's what changes things. Lena rested her arms on the railing, staring out at the city she had once feared. I used to think strength meant surviving quietly. Now I know it also means speaking, even when your voice shakes. Julian watched her, something deep and certain settling in his chest. The city hadn't swallowed her. It had tried and failed. But far away, in a quiet office lit by a single desk lamp, Victor Hale stared at a screen, replaying Lena's speech. His lips curled slowly into a thin smile. Interesting, he murmured, his voice barely audible, as the screen went dark. Victor remained seated for a long moment, fingers steepled, eyes unfocused. The game wasn't over far from it. In fact, it had only just begun. Lena Harper had stepped onto the board, not as a piece to be moved or sacrificed, but as an unknown variable, an unknown's unsettled cities built on predictability. She wasn't loud, she wasn't reckless. That was what made her dangerous. The following days brought a strange kind of peace. It was the uneasy calm that followed a near miss, the pause between thunderclaps. Headlines softened, their language shifting from sharp accusations to careful neutrality. Dispute under review. Community voices heard. The city council postponed its votes, citing the need for additional assessment. Rosewood Bend's land case entered a bureaucratic limbo, frozen under legal review. On the surface, things looked calmer. Underneath, everything was still moving. Julian wasted no time. He arranged for an independent legal advocate to review Rosewood Bend's claims, someone with no ties to King Holdings, no quiet favors owed to Victor or his board. It wasn't easy. Influence ran deep and neutrality was rare. But eventually he found someone stubborn enough to risk isolation for integrity. Lena insisted on attending every meeting, even when exhaustion dragged at her limbs, even when her eyes burned from lack of sleep and her voice felt thin by the end of the day. "I won't be talked about in rooms I'm not allowed into," she said firmly the first time Julian suggested she rest. He studied her, then nodded. All right. She listened more than she spoke, absorbing legal language, zoning codes, environmental assessments. She learned how carefully words could be shaped to obscure intent, how silence could be weaponized just as easily as pressure. And she learned how to recognize when someone underestimated her, how their shoulders relaxed too much, how they explained things too slowly. One afternoon, she left a meeting early and went to the hospital. The corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic and old flowers. Grandma Evelyn lay propped up against pillows, her frame thinner than Lena remembered, but her eyes still sharp, still searching. "I saw you on the television," Grandma said softly. Lena winced. "I'm sorry." "For what?" Grandma asked. "For dragging all of this into the open." Grandma smiled faintly. "You stood straight." Lena moved closer, taking her grandmother's hand. It felt fragile, almost weightless. "I was scared," she admitted. "Good," Grandma replied without hesitation. "Means you cared." They sat in silence for a moment, the steady beep of machines filling the space. Then Grandma spoke again, her voice quieter. "Your mother would have done the same." The words landed heavier than Lena expected. She swallowed. "Why didn't you tell me everything about what she fought?" "About Rosewood Bend," Grandma sighed, turning her gaze toward the window. "Because I wanted you to live light, not carry her battles before you were ready." "And now?" Lena asked. Grandma squeezed her hand, strength flickering through the frailty. "Now you're ready." That evening Julian's phone buzzed while he was reviewing documents. He read the message once, then again. His jaw tightened. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Victor," Julian said. "He's requested a private mediation session. With you present." Lena felt her pulse quicken. "Why now?" Julian looked up at her. "Because you didn't disappear, and because slowing things down cost him leverage." Lena exhaled slowly. She understood now. Power hated delays. It thrived on momentum, on inevitability. And for the first time, Victor didn't have either. "He wants control back," she said. Julian nodded. "Which means he's willing to talk." Lena looked toward the window, where the city lights shimmered like distant stars. "Then we listen," she said. "But we don't bend." Julian allowed himself a thin smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." The peace, she knew, was temporary, but it wasn't empty. It was the space before a choice was forced. And this time she would be ready. Lena exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that came from somewhere deeper than her lungs. It carried weeks of sleepless nights, unanswered letters, and the quiet weight of knowing that once a line was crossed, there was no retreat. The city hummed beyond the window, alive and indifferent. "Then I'll go," she said. Julian looked up from the scattered papers on the table. He studied her the way one studied a storm forming on the horizon, not with fear, but with calculation. He had seen ambition before. He had seen courage, too. What unsettled him was how calmly she carried both. "You don't have to face him alone," he said. "Victor doesn't play fair. He never has." "I won't," Lena replied. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "But I won't hide either." That made Julian pause. He leaned back, folding his arms. "There's a difference between standing your ground and walking into a trap." Lena met his eyes. "I know, but there's also a difference between fear and caution. I'm done confusing the two." For a moment neither of them spoke. Julian nodded once, slow and reluctant. "Then we do this properly." The mediation took place 2 days later in a neutral office tower near the river glass walls. Muted colors, expensive restraint. It was the kind of place designed to feel impartial while quietly favoring power. The city stretched below, streets threading together like veins, traffic pulsing steadily as if nothing important was happening at all. Victor arrived precisely on time. He moved with the ease of a man who had never doubted he belonged in any room he entered. His suit was tailored without flash, his watch understated but unmistakably expensive. He smiled as though smiles were currency, something to be spent carefully. "Miss Harper," he said, extending a hand. "You've made quite an impression." Lena shook his hand, firm but brief. "So have you." Victor's eyes flickered just for a moment before he chuckled softly. "Direct. I like that." They sat. Julian positioned himself slightly behind, and to Lena's right, not as a shield, but as a reminder that she was not isolated. Victor noticed. He always noticed. "I'll be frank," Victor said, folding his hands. "Conviction is admirable, truly, but conviction without experience can be dangerous, especially when emotions are involved." Lena didn't rush her reply. She had learned that silence unsettled people like Victor more than argument ever could. "And experience without conscience," she said finally, "is worse." The smile didn't leave Victor's face, but something hardened behind it. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other. "You're young, idealistic. That's not an insult. It's an observation. The world runs on compromise." Julian shifted, ready to interject, but Lena lifted a finger slightly. She had this. "You want to protect your village," Victor continued, "your grandmother's land, a legacy built on sentiment. I understand that. But progress doesn't wait." "Progress for who?" Lena asked. Victor tilted his head as if considering a philosophical puzzle. "For everyone, eventually." "That wasn't an answer," she said. Victor smiled again, wider this time. "Answers are relative." Lena folded her hands on the table, mirroring his posture. "So is power." The air in the room subtly changed. Victor's tone softened, but the words sharpened. "There are ways to ensure everyone walks away comfortable," he said. financial arrangements, relocation assistance, a plaque even, history preserved. You could do a lot of good with what I'm offering. I'm not interested in comfort, Lena replied. I'm interested in fairness. Victor studied her now without disguise. The moment stretched. He was weighing her, not just her resolve, but how costly it would be to break it. Fairness, he repeated. That's a flexible concept. Only if you're the one bending it, Lena said. Julian's lips twitched despite himself. Victor nodded slowly. We'll see how long that holds. The meeting ended without handshakes. As Victor exited, his reflection briefly crossed the glass wall, distorted, elongated, almost unreal. When the door closed, Julian exhaled sharply. That wasn't negotiation. No, Lena agreed. It was reconnaissance. That was a warning, Julian said. Yes, she replied. And an invitation. To what? He asked. Lena looked back at the city skyline. To underestimate me. That night, Lena stood by the window of her apartment once more, watching the lights flicker on and off like distant signals. Below, the river moved quietly, unchanged by glass towers and ambition alike. She thought of her grandmother's hands, weathered, steady, capable. Of stories told by lantern light about land that remembered names long after cities forgot them. Of her mother, who had once stood in a room like that office and walked out with nothing but resolve. Something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer reacting. She was choosing. The city had tried to rewrite her story quietly, cruelly, efficiently. Contracts instead of threats. Polite smiles instead of force. It assumed erosion would do what confrontation could not. It was wrong. Lena understood now what her mother had learned too late. Power didn't always roar. It didn't always announce itself with raised voices or broken doors. Sometimes it waited. Sometimes it watched. And when it moved, it did so with precision. Her phone buzzed messages from journalists, community leaders, legal advisors. Momentum, once sparked, was difficult to contain. She wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Outside, the river at Rosewood Bend still flowed steady and patient, carrying silt and memory alike. It had outlasted storms, deals, and men who believed they could own it. And somewhere between its current and the restless city lights, Lena stood, no longer just surviving the storm, but shaping what came after. You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan.